Welcome to the Art of Actual Change. I'm your host, Lianna Nielsen, former health specialist turned wildlife conservation fine art photographer. Through my travels around the world, I've met some fascinating people doing amazing work to make this planet a better place to live. Each week, I'll be bringing you these people, letting them tell their stories, and hopefully you'll gather information on how you can make a difference and learn the art of actually making a change. Welcome back to the Art of Actual Change. I'm your host, Lianna Nielsen, and today I am very excited to have this lovely guest, Lianna Nielsen. I will come straight out and tell you, she is my cousin, but that does not stop me from wanting to have her on the show, because on this show, as you know, we're going to be having some very fascinating, interesting people, and I could not think of anyone more fascinating than my cousin, Lianna. So, Lianna, you are an actress, or maybe you were an actress. You're starting to give that up a little bit.
Yeah, I would say reformed actress.
Reformed actress. But now you're focusing more on health and life coaching. Tell me a little bit about what you're working on.
Sure. So for the past 6 years, I've had my own small business in addition to acting. I am an integrative nutrition, health, and wellness coach. So essentially, I do nutrition and lifestyle coaching, sort of the mind-body connection. I help people improve their health, but physically and mentally, because just counting calories alone does not actually make you healthy. Fun fact. And I came to this work initially because I had my own health crisis in my 20s while acting and living in New York City and running around and bartending and drinking too much whiskey and staying up too late, all of the fun things.
Yeah.
And for a while, I was doing both. I ended up what happened was I started having all these crazy symptoms from, anxiety and depression. My hair was falling out, my period stopped, my skin went crazy. I started having all of these physical reactions to food in my mouth and throat.
Yeah, it's pretty serious.
It was pretty scary. And then it culminated with my intestines were bleeding all the time. And I, eventually got to the place where I went to like Dr. Google and was like, do I have colon cancer at 25? Like, what's happening?
Right. Something is not right. Yeah.
Something is not right. This is not okay. And I was seeing so many different doctors and everyone was trying to prescribe a pill or a cream or something. And I ended up getting a colonoscopy and they were like, yeah, you definitely are about to develop an autoimmune disease. Like there are a few it could be. We're not quite sure which one it is yet. So why don't you come back in a year when things get worse and then we'll put you on steroids for the rest of your life. And they give me this pamphlet for steroids, and the side effects of the steroids are like almost as bad as all of the things that are happening in my body already. And I was like, this can't be right. And I get a second opinion. Yeah. No. And the same thing. And I was sort of like, listen, and not to be gross, but I'm like, I'm literally like bleeding out of my butt every day. And you're telling me that I should get worse. And I'm like, this is not fascinating.
Is as bad as I would like it to get. Thank you. And
thank you very much.
I'm going to come back with a different option. This is not how I'm going to go.
And luckily, I sort of grew up in a more holistic, hippy dippy family, as you know. Your Uncle Howie is hippie. And I remember my mom being like, why don't we just do some of our own research? Because no one liked the idea of me going on antidepressants. And then, it was just like, and steroids and never eating raw fruits and vegetables again and hormonal. But it was just like literally pills for everything. And so I ended up doing all this research around inflammation, which is what I found out was going on in my intestines. So I was like, okay, intestinal inflammation led me to this book about the microbiome. And this was, over 10 years ago. No one was talking about the microbiome. No one knew what that was. So I, within reading this book, realized that all of my symptoms were related to this inflammation in my gut or a dysbiosis in my microbiome or in the little bacteria that live in your intestines and control everything from your metabolism to your immune system to your brain function.
Right. They're incredibly important.
They
run your body in a way.
We're just like a big meat suit to host all these bugs. We just have to make sure we keep them happy and our whole body's fine. So it seemed pretty straightforward. I had to really change my diet, take some supplements, heal like my gut walls, repopulate my bacteria essentially. And it was crazy because of course I was a sorority girl. I was a bartender. I'm like, you want me to cut out alcohol for six
Right. This
months
is,
and bread and coffee? Like what?
I could
And
change my
sugar?
lifestyle completely.
I know it was a very strange shift in identity that took a long time to happen because I very much identify. I was like the fun one, and I did comedy, and I would stay up late. And it was all like, no, no, you have to go to bed, you have to meditate, you have like all this holistic stuff. I was giving a shot, and it blew my mind because I kind of did it as a last ditch effort to avoid going on pretty severe steroids. And I remember within 12 days of changing my diet, I remember waking up one day and it was like someone took like a really crappy Instagram filter off of my life. And I felt like someone had stripped 10 years off. I felt like I was 16 all over again.
Wow.
I swear. I remember this feeling where it was like I all of a sudden had energy. My outlook on life was optimistic. My brain felt clear. Food tasted different. I had more confidence. And it felt like truly like it happened overnight because healing your gut can heal within 3 days of changing your diet. That's how often the cells turn over in your gut walls. And it's very easy to start to repopulate the bugs that live in your intestines that affect your brain. So within not even 2 weeks, I had completely shifted, and years of anxiety and depression were just gone. I
Wow.
couldn't believe it. And here I was living in New York City, seeing specialists,
Yeah.
and no one had even suggested anything like this.
Yeah.
And then within, 6 months to a year, my hair grew back, my period came, everything reversed for the most part.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so insane because if I had listened to all of these specialists I was seeing, I would be spending so much money on medication and I would be on so many different pharmaceutical drugs. So I was hooked. I was so fascinated. And being an actor, I was kind of like, how is no one talking to
Yeah.
performers? Like our bodies are businesses,
Like,
our brains, like what we eat affect our emotions. How is no one even talking to like
right.
performers
Like, I
about
can't be
this?
the only one. Right.
No,
Right.
no. And I had so many friends, actors, writers, comedians, dealing with depression, dealing with anxiety. And I was like, you know what happens? Like they make jokes about when people become vegan and it's all they can talk about. That was essentially what happened to me. And I was sort of like, oh my God, you have to fix your gut health, everyone.
Right. It's
So
the
here
CrossFitter syndrome. It's the vegan. It's like,
yes,
and it's like, well, this is actually working out very well for me, and I want to share it. I'm so excited about it, and everyone's like,
shut
"Yes,
up.
you're killing me." Like,
So what started to happen was I started to attract all these people who really needed this information. And so I ended up looking to become either a dietitian or a nutritionist. And I looked into all these programs, and not one was talking about gut health. No one was talking about the gut brain connection. No one even mentioned the microbiome. And I had gained weight during that time when I was pretty sick too, like especially around my midsection. And I remember I'd gone to a nutritionist who was like someone very high up that was on the Today Show all the time, like doing
wow.
segments
Yeah.
around nutrition. And she made me so much sicker because I went in and she told me, she's like, oh, you're eating too many vegetables. That's why you have all these problems with your gut. You need to start eating more whole grains. And she's had me eating like a bunch more gluten, which I'm intolerant to, which is basically the worst thing for my physical and mental
Yikes.
health.
Yeah.
And I went from like having some symptoms to having really bad symptoms and having like lots of bleeding and all these things that I didn't know why. But so I was like, well, I definitely don't want to become that kind of nutritionist because she made me so sick.
Right. It's like throwing
So
darts and just hoping one lands, and it's
it
not.
was it was so crazy. So I ended up finding the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, which is a certification for health coaches. And I didn't even know I was like, what the hell is a health coach? Like, okay. But it ended up being really fascinating and a game changer. And then I started just teaching workshops to artists in New York City. I started teaching actors. I got asked to join this conservatory. So for a number of years, I taught a nutrition class for performers at a conservatory and then got connected to NYU. So I was doing guest lecturing for their undergraduate performance majors and like vocal performance and then just being asked to speak and contribute to articles.
Right.
And then so my private practice grew and it was really perfect for a while because it was, me making my own schedule. And as an actor, your schedule's so crazy anyway. So for a while it was like they were hand in hand and it was really fun because it felt
Yeah.
like I was getting to do this thing I really loved, but I was also giving back. And then when the pandemic hit, it really was interesting because I mean, acting is amazing. Like I've had movies go to Sundance. I, was on the Tonight Show for a couple years. I've done really big commercials, and it's really rewarding. But it also, to me, was one of those experiences where you attain this thing that you've wanted for so long, that you think is going to make you happy,
Yeah.
or that you think is going to like be the pinnacle, and you get it, and then it's sort of like a little bit empty and meaningless. Like I remember doing the red carpet at Sundance for my first like big movie thing. I didn't have a huge
Right.
role, but I was in a number of scenes, and
Sure.
people are shouting your name and taking your picture, and people are recognizing you from your movie. And it was like the best day of my life. I was like, this is amazing. And then
Absolutely.
I get back and I'm bartending again. And it was like, oh, none of that's real.
Right.
Like this is my life. And like that's it, it feels like chasing a drug high or something. So the more I did it, like I definitely built a community. I was doing a lot of really great stuff, but the more I the deeper I got in with health and wellness, and the more I started working with people, the more you start to see yourself having a positive impact on other people's lives. It was I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm wasting 2 hours of my day like going to an audition, sitting and reading about like being in a Buick commercial or something, reading
Right.
commercial copy about like some car.
Right.
Or I could be at home watching some woman who has, been parked on antidepressants for the last 20 years and had no idea about nutrition, fall in love with herself again and like learn how to use her
Oh, it's
brain
so
and connect to
rewarding.
her body. And so it was really interesting because I fought it for a long time because I had gone to an acting conservatory. It was very much my ego was really attached to it. It was really part of my identity being an actor. And of course, like especially when I was younger, I was like, no, I want a recurring role. I want to be on HBO series. And I got close to a lot of that stuff.
Right.
And so and again, it's such a heartbreaking career because I had a number of times where I was close to like really big TV shows or really big moments where they would have changed my entire career. And then of course, like they picked the other person.
Oh,
So it's like there's a number of those things where it's like, okay, does this
that's
really
a
make
lot of
me
heartbreak.
happy? Oh my God, it was like 10 years of, and you learn how to deal with it. But in the beginning, oh my God, there was so much crying on the bathroom floor or in the shower.
Yeah, and I'm
Like,
sure there's like this competitiveness too as an actress that like and just like that you set out this is what I want to do and I need to do it because if I don't then maybe someone will see me as a failure or I let people down or
yes,
whatever it is like there's this pressure like I have to succeed because like there's a lot of stigma with actors and actresses. It's like oh you end up like a waitress or like you moved out to California and it was like oh you're an actor that's really cute and it's like
yeah.
and you don't
Oh,
want to be that person
no,
and
and no one takes you seriously, especially in the beginning. All of your friends and family are like, "Oh, fun," and then when people see you on TV,
right.
that feels good for a little while.
I remember
But
watching, I
it's
remember
like,
tuning in. I mean, it was like, that's my cousin. I was so excited.
no, that was really fun. And I remember I did some like silly Discovery ID show that Grandma got to see before she passed away. And I remember she called me on the phone and was like, oh, "I saw you on television and like you made it." And it was
That's
this cute
amazing.
moment of like, I'm far from making it, but like you finally see what I've at least been trying to do, which is
Yeah.
cool.
So,
But it was definitely it has had its ups and downs, but I got to a point where I realized like, oh, I'm really good at this other thing.
yeah,
And like it comes effortlessly to me. I've like almost been ignoring this business and it's been growing.
yeah,
And
that's a good sign.
there's a certain point, and I truly believe this, where and I was progressing with my acting career, but not in the way that I wanted, not as quickly as I would have liked. It was still feeling a little bit stressful from time to time. And here I had this whole other career that was like, hey, we just want to give you money and make you
Yeah,
feel good
come
because you're doing good.
here.
And I truly think that like after a while, like if it's not opening, if there's this other avenue that's like it's not your door. And
Yeah,
it took me a number of years and the pandemic truly to be honest with myself because last year started and all auditioning stopped. And it was so funny because I just moved to Los Angeles to sort of to pursue acting, but also to expand my business. And I got so burnt out living in New York City that I was like, okay, a little more life balance, the beach. And within a couple months of the pandemic, I was not auditioning and I was so happy. because all of a sudden, all these clients too, everyone
Right, you
really
have
needed
time,
mental health
right? You
support.
have things you can focus on.
And I was like, I'm so happy. And then it was like this few-month process of like, oh my God, am I letting go of this? Am I letting go of this? And I remember having to like talk to my old therapist and really just like untangle the whole egoic part of being an actor and being like, I feel like I'm a failure. And
Right,
it was
exactly.
funny because he had me do this whole process where he's like, well, you know, how are you a failure? Like, tell me all of your accomplishments. And I had to like say what I had accomplished. And I was like, oh no, I was a working actor.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty
I'm
good.
not like Jennifer Aniston, but like I definitely wasn't a failure. I'm great. Like to this day, I still have good representation if I choose to pursue it here or, do it in New York. But it was one of those things where it was like, oh no, this is me like having a large attachment to something that's no longer serving me.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes, like, your callings in life, they end up finding you. Right?
Yes.
Like, you're
Oh
not
my
really
gosh.
looking for them, or you're not pursuing this. Like, me as a photographer, like, I didn't ever think that I'd be really into photography, and it was just one of those things that just happened. And with you,
I
with this,
know.
with the coaching that you're doing, again, you were like, "No, I'm not really interested. Like, I like it. It helped me, but, um, no, I'm not sure." And then it just becomes like, "Wow, okay, yeah, I really like this. I'm passionate about it. I'm taking it places." So, real quick, back to what you said. Your body was going under all these attacks from what you were eating, your stress, and your life. And what was the change that you actually made to help yourself? Like, was it diet alone, or was it
It was
meditation?
started with diet.
Okay.
Diet was the first thing that made the biggest impact. Diet and sleep.
And what about the
Those
diet?
two. I cut out all processed food for almost 6 months. No sugar, no grains at all, no dairy, no caffeine. And I basically really focused on like vegetables, clean proteins, high quality fats, like very little fruit, even very like not really a lot of starchy vegetables either. Um, and then I was taking some supplements, so prebiotics and probiotics and things that would naturally heal your gut wall, things like bone broth and collagen. But all nothing, nothing pharmaceutical, everything over the counter. And that got me pretty far. That did, I would say 75% of the healing came from that alone.
And
Like,
how long did you stick to that?
about, it was really, really strict for 4 months. I loosened it up at 6. And then I started to bring things back in. And it's been a number of years of negotiation because, of course, and I see this with my clients all the time, you want to go back to do what you're doing, what you were doing. So, like, I eventually went back, but it was a few years of really kind of trial and error because I got to the point where like I really had to cut out caffeine again because what ends up happening when you have a lot of inflammation in your body, your cortisol levels, which are your stress hormones, they end up being elevated. If you have elevated cortisol levels from stress, from inflammation, from being chased by a bear for 10
Yeah,
years,
yeah, it's not good.
or being in a job you hate or a marriage you don't like,
Right.
you will eventually run out of cortisol. Your adrenal glands that produce them get tired. So I was running really, really high in cortisol for a number of years, plus acting. And it's so funny. They talk about, I was definitely an anxious, I've always been an anxious person. I'm someone who has just erred on the side of having a little bit more anxiety. So I was someone who would get really nervous for auditions. And they say auditions are the equivalent to a minor car accident in terms of just adrenaline in your body. So
Right.
not only am I like drinking coffee, not sleeping enough,
You get in
but
car
like
accidents.
I'm getting in car accidents like 6 times a week. My body's like, what is going on here? So I ended up with adrenal fatigue a couple of years later. So I really, really had to cut out caffeine. But it was around that time where it was like, I've come such a long way in my healing. And it was funny because I tried to go back to all of my regular doctors and everyone just thought I was nuts for what I was trying. So I ended up in Brooklyn with this amazing naturopath. And I tell people to this day, because I remember my primary care doctor in Manhattan was lovely, but she was this grumpy, like 50s overweight lady who, just like gray hair, just doesn't, not the pinnacle of health.
Right.
I end up finding this, naturopath who's, only a couple, probably early 30s, beautiful skin, glowing hair, like
Gorgeous.
totally fit. And then I'm just like, oh, I want health information from this person,
Right.
not this other one.
Right.
She really was like, you need to meditate, you need to meditate, you need to meditate. It's going to help with, because I had healed my gut a lot, but there was still some like with stress. my condition gets exacerbated. So I was having moments where things would get flared up again, and my adrenals were really tired. And she was like, "You have to start meditating." And I fought it for such a long time. And finally, and it's just the funniest story. Oh, it's the dumbest story, maybe. But I remember I'd gotten married, we'd moved to Brooklyn. I didn't really know where I was in Brooklyn, because it was like a new neighborhood. And my husband was at the time was working in Stamford, Connecticut at NBC. So he was like 2 hours almost away. And I was in this period of my life where I was just like going, 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 which in New York is very easy to do.
Yeah.
And I remember I got up one day and I'd gone to this really long run, and it was in the middle of the summer. It was really hot. I hadn't eaten anything. I came back super dehydrated. And I used to be on this improv team. So I was like rushing around to eat something before I went to improv practice and not paying attention. I totally like brand new wedding knives and pitting an avocado. And the pit doesn't want to come out. So I just really hard, I go for it. And I literally almost cut the index finger on my left hand in half. And it's one of those things where it's like, when you cut yourself, you grab it really quick. And you're like, it's probably not that bad, right?
Ugh.
And I opened my hand and blood like literally splurted everywhere. And I like tried to call my husband. He didn't pick up. He was like in a meeting. I tried to call the one other person I knew in the neighborhood. She didn't pick up.
Right, right.
And so I called 911 because what started to happen was I started to go black because I was
Right. You're
I hadn't
faking.
eaten
Right.
anything. And I was like getting really faint. So I ended up spending, and it was so funny because I only needed like 6 stitches, but I have nerve damage. I can't feel the top of this finger. Like it was really bad. So I ended up like an ambulance comes and like police come. They're like, "Little girl, what happened to you?" And I was like, "Oh, I was doing an avocado." And they're like, "Oh, gross, bye."
Right.
I end up like alone at the ER for like most of the day waiting to get stitches. I end up home with a husband who's like pissed at me because I took an ambulance and it's expensive. And, I was bartending. We didn't have a ton of money at the time. And I just remember it was like almost a rock bottom where it was like I felt really frustrated. I felt like I was spinning in place with my acting career. Like I wasn't getting ahead of, I was trying really, really hard and things were not progressing fast enough. And I'd gotten to this stagnation point with my healing, where it's like I'd done everything and I was still like not totally healed yet. And I hated bartending. I was so sick of it at that point. I was really frustrated with that.
Sure.
And I just remember like taking a bunch of like pain medication all weekend and like getting drunk. And then that Monday, having literally nothing lined up, nothing to do. I couldn't bartend as my finger was like a disaster.
Sure.
And my husband was at work. And I just remember like really having this point of surrender of being like, I don't have anything to do. Like my life is not working out. I feel very frustrated. And of course, like, especially when you get married, it feels like I'm supposed to be an adult now. And
Right.
like, like either you have a baby or your career's together. It's like, I was like ashamed that I was still bartending. I was feeling just really, frustrated in a lot of areas of my life. And I just remember being like, okay, I guess I'm gonna meditate. Like, I don't know what else to do. And I like found some guided meditation on YouTube, and my life changed from then on.
Is there any particular type of meditation that you do? I know there's a couple different kinds, or I'm sure
I
you
do a lot of
don't know
different
much
kinds
about
now.
meditation because I haven't taken it on quite myself yet. I want to, but is there
Oh
anyone
my
that
gosh.
you
I tell people to start with guided because it's almost the easiest.
sure, right.
That's like what I did for a number of years. I tell my, or like get Calm or Headspace. There's so many different apps that are great. But I just tell people like find a voice that you like and then just try to pay attention to it. That's all
Good.
meditation is.
Yeah.
Really sit
Okay.
still, lay down, and try to listen. And your mind will wander and wander, and you just have to bring it back and bring it back. But in that, it not only healed what was going on with my adrenals, because meditation is really good for balancing hormones, it's really good for healing, it's really good for lowering your inflammation. And because it's so good for lowering inflammation, it also really helps heal my intestines. But then what you don't realize is, I mean, meditation, if it was a pill, would be $1 billion industry. I cannot recommend something more to people. It is the best thing you can do for yourself, both physically and mentally. If you do it often enough, it can reverse your age on a cellular level. It
Wow.
is that good for you.
Wow.
But what I didn't realize, I sort of was like, I guess what the heck, I'll try it, is you develop a different understanding and a different relationship to your brain and your thoughts. And what starts to happen is there is a separation from you thinking and then you sort of identifying with that thought and acting. And that space gets bigger and bigger. So there's opportunity for conscious choice in the gap. And that's when everything, like, that is the sweet spot. Because then you realize, because so we all have the same, especially if we haven't had enough sleep or something bad happens or we're eating really poorly or drinking too much. We all have some version of the negative feedback loop, like you're stupid, you're ugly, you're not good enough,
Right.
you don't
Yeah.
make
Like,
enough
what are you
money, like you're too
doing?
fat.
Yeah.
It's whatever it is, whatever, that's a dumb idea, you need a better boyfriend. Like everyone's got some version of that thing over and over again. But once you start to understand your specific patterns and you have that gap, you can see that thought and be like, that's not true. And instead of holding on to it and going down that rabbit hole or that anxiety spiral and ruminating over and creating more stress, you just let it go. Because we always are having thoughts. Our minds are meaning making machines. That's their whole
That's
job.
exactly.
We shouldn't be listening to them. What we really should be listening to is our body, because that's where the wisdom is. Like your enteric nervous system in your intestines is smarter than your brain. Like you really should be listening to your gut. Your brain is just trying to save you from dying
It's
and keep
that
you
gut
safe at all
feeling, right?
times.
Like, listen to
Yeah,
that gut
truly,
feeling.
truly, truly. And that's the funniest thing about what I thought. I obviously came to this work because of nutrition and, healed my body that way. So I was very fascinated with that element of it for a long time. But because I went to a more holistic nutrition school, they really taught you two sort of primary things. One was the idea of bioindividuality, which is the idea that everyone's different and what works for me in terms of food, exercise, sleep, it could be poison for you. You know what I mean? The amount of sleep you get could make me sick. The types of food you eat could totally make me sick. So it's our job to really find out what works for us. And we live in this society that sort of believes that, like, you just, when you're sick, you just like show up at the doctor like you would at the mechanic and be like, fix it.
Fix
Where
it.
it's like really on you to figure that out. And then the other concept is the idea of primary foods versus secondary foods. And your primary foods are your relationship, your career or purpose, spirituality, whatever that means to you. It doesn't have to be religious, and
Sure.
exercise. And secondary foods are food, alcohol, drugs, anything you ingest. And the idea is that one of your primary foods is out of balance, it will manifest as a secondary food craving. And so I was taught to get to the root cause of life imbalances, disease, extra weight from the get go. So here I was thinking that I was like some hippy dippy nutritionist. And like 6 months into opening my practice, I'm coaching people into new careers and divorces
Right.
because that's the reason they're eating how they're eating. That's the reason they gained weight. That's where all the stress is coming from. But what I didn't really realize that in service of the bioindividuality, in the way I was taught to really just, you're the expert of your own body. Let's figure out what works for you. Me empowering you to listen in that way. Your body doesn't just tell you it doesn't like dairy. Your body also tells you like, oh, I need to get out of this job, or like I need to get out of this relationship. So it's really fascinating. What I essentially do now is help people optimize their bodies
Yeah.
physically so they can connect deeper and create lives they love. Because what's so hard is actually listening and trusting that voice. Because often it makes no sense. Like for me, I got to a certain point in my healing journey and I was married to the most amazing man. He was the guy of my dreams, like growing up. We had
Yeah.
this beautiful life, everything, all the trappings that society would tell you need. He was like a CEO of a company, super handsome, very lovely. I could hang out all day and go on auditions and get Botox if I wanted. And I just was like I had this calling. It was like, this isn't it. This
Right.
isn't right for me anymore. And it took a really long time for me to really learn to listen it because it was insane. I was like, you're in your 30s, like you're like, I was in my mid 30s. I was like, you're past your prime, like who's gonna want you now? You're not gonna have a baby, like all that and he got to a point where like he was supporting us because he was doing really well. He's like,
Sure.
I was barely making money. I was like, this is the dumbest. And we had finally got to this really easy, nice financial situation where we could do whatever.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where it was like, this is the most insane thing to do. Like, don't ever do it. But my body was kind of like, it's the only way for you to like feel alive and
Right.
like fully step into your purpose. And I had to take the leap. And what's been funny is, and again, like you say, your calling kind of finds you in that. Like I had to go to this I went through a pretty big transformational period in terms of just like really stepping into my own, really learning to trust myself, really learning to trust myself as a businesswoman, and you know, really start to listen and show up for my creativity in a different way. And in that, like my practice is transformed into helping other people do the same through healing their bodies initially, or just optimizing them physically.
Yeah, and then you're definitely the expert in this sort of field. And one of the questions I have for you is that as a personal trainer, there was these. I was a personal trainer for 15 years, and there's these kind of stereotypes in the industry of like personal trainers, like they're just going to scream at you, and they're like, rah rah rah, and they're gonna most oftentimes beat you down into in some sort of injury. um, what are some of the biggest stereotypes or myths of your profession? Because I've heard people they hear the term like holistic medicine or holistic health, or and they shy away from it like it's some sort of hippie guru thing. What are some of the myths or, like I said, stereotypes that you'd like to kind of squash and say this is what it actually is instead of what people may believe it is?
I love that question so much because people are afraid. Well, it's becoming more normalized, but people are like, I think people assume I probably have no training of any kind. And you know what I mean? And it's funny because I have more nutrition training than most doctors today. They only get about
Sure.
4 hours. And
Wow.
I've spent years of my life reading about the science behind what food does to your body. And I think they all just assume that we're going to tell people like not to eat meat, to only have kale and green smoothies, to
Right.
never drink alcohol, to never have sugar, to, you know what I mean, never have any fun, that you have to like be super boring, you know, or that, we're going to force like shame you into whatever eating if you eat Doritos. I think there's a lot of, or it's going to be very expensive. I think there's a lot of, especially now more and more, I think it's associated with that culture of like, you know, upper class white ladies who, Gwyneth Paltrow, all of
Yeah.
that stuff, who actually I like what she's trying to do, but it that it's expensive, that we don't know what we're talking about, and that it's going to be really, really strict. And I put a lot of my clients on this sugar detox that I got from one of my favorite doctors who
Yeah,
taught
I've
it in
done it.
school.
It's incredible.
And even like people get really triggered by the idea of sugar detox, where it's really a whole foods reset is probably a better name for it. It's similar to the whole 30, but a little less starchy food involved. And people, I think, go into it often feeling like it's going to be so horrible. And then you can speak to it. I mean, you feel amazing, right?
You do, yeah.
It's this. So I think that often people are afraid that I'm going to make you eat tofu or like
There's just a
just
lot
like
of like, these preconceived notions of what it is. And there's so much more to it. And I find
right.
that just from doing my own research, following you on Instagram and Facebook, and just hearing everything you have to say about it. Do you find that your clients, your current clients, come to you as like a last resource, or is it something that like they heard like you did, like you were like, I am at rock bottom, I need help like in a big way? Or is it people who are just like, I'm into more of health things because COVID made me paranoid, like what is
Both. I have
both?
both. I have people who, and my heart goes out to them, especially women, because a lot of, you may not know this, but a lot of medical studies aren't done on women. So, people are put on medication, women especially, and they're like, they don't even know how it's going to affect their hormonal cycles. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so I've had a lot of people who don't know where else to go, who have been really fed up with like traditional diets. And I don't ever put anyone on diets. I don't even make people do the detox if they don't want to. I educate people on nutrition and food, and then we work together to decide what works for you. And I would do that in a way of being like, well, what do you like? What do you crave? It's all you, it's self-directed. I'm helping you learn to listen, and I'm empowering you. So I get a lot of people who have been through the ringer with our medical industry, and like me, had seen a lot of doctors, had gotten a lot of sort of mixed or bad advice, and feel really hopeless. Autoimmunity affects a lot of women in our country just because our immune system is a little bit more sensitive because we carry children. And so I get a lot of people in that range. But now, because especially because of COVID, there are people who are just like, I'm actually interested in learning more about this. And I don't know, it's getting better and better, but there aren't a lot of people who are necessarily having this like big holistic approach to it. Like you can find someone who's going to champion keto or paleo or fasting. And hey, if you want to try those things and you have the right reasons, and I'll educate you on them, and we'll work through those if you want to. But I'm never going to promote one certain thing. And I get a lot of people too coming to me who just want to lose weight, and I take them still sometimes, but what you're gonna get with me if you're really obsessed with like your body and your food, it's like we're gonna figure out why. Because if you're in this cycle of dieting all the time, like it's not about that.
It's
You
deeper
know,
than just your,
it's
yeah,
much deeper
right.
than that. And I just right now I'm dealing with this with a male client that I have who I adore. But he even said it. It was like we're 8 weeks into this program and he's lost some weight and he's still really obsessed about it. And he's like, I think I just can't stick to it because I know at the end of the day I'll lose weight and I still won't be happy. And I was like, boom.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not about that. That's what I've been trying to tell you to do. So a lot of people, like I remember this woman was with me for a couple of years, and she was one of those people who just like had been neglected by the system, had been on antidepressants for a long time, was really overweight, had done a lot of different things. No one had educated her on her body or nutrition. And she stayed with me for 2.5 years because I give people like goals or homework essentially. And she was a writer, and she was really feeling disconnected from this novel that she wanted to publish. And again, going back to primary foods, like if you're not happy in other areas of your life, you tend to just overeat or indulge in alcohol or caffeine because our bodies are smart. That's going to make you happy really briefly. So she was eating dessert 3 times a day, this whole thing.
yeah.
One of her homework, besides like adding more vegetables, was query her novel to a bunch of agents. And she stayed with me for a number of years because I was one of the first people that ever recognized, like, let's create balance in your whole life. Let's, and I always, when people come to me and they want to get healthy and they've been struggling for a long time, I always make them connect to their why. Because if it's because you want to show up for your kids, or it's because, you want to be this amazing
What's
photographer
your
and you have to
motivation?
be, yeah, you have to understand why you're doing it to be able to give up cake all the time. But the cool thing is, and I have a pretty boring healthy diet at this point, and people are always like, how don't you don't have caffeine or you don't drink very much, or you don't really have sugar. And it's like, I don't even think about it because I love my life so much. Like I don't have to like find happiness at the bottom of a bag of cookies or a glass of wine. Like I'll do it occasionally, but I like being present and feeling really good and having energy in my body every day. So I'm not missing a moment of it.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things that I've found as a personal trainer is that people would come to me as for weight loss as well. And I would say, well, that's you should be talking to somebody else because what I do for you as a personal trainer, it's going to take so much work to lose weight and that you're not actually making a change. You're just changing your body for a little bit. And then we all hear like the people on The Biggest Loser who they lost all this weight and then you check back in on them a year or two later and it's all back on, or it's even more than what they started with. And it's because they didn't dive deeper into actually like making like changes throughout many facets of their life, which oftentimes is psychological, with family issues, stress, that sort of thing. So, is there, I think what you're doing, is there any risk of people falling back into, have you ever seen a client that just like bailed on you and then fell back into the same patterns as they were making progress?
Yeah, yeah. People will, because I mean, I remember working with this one woman and we uncovered the root of her sugar addiction was this abortion she never had dealt with in her 20s. And we talked about it one session, and she was really like, she came out with it. I didn't, force her or anything. And then she never want to come back.
Wow,
And it
that's
was like she wasn't ready to deal with it. And like,
wow.
and hopefully she took that to a therapist, and sometimes I'm referring people to therapists because what will uncover it, or I do have a lot of people come to me who are also in therapy, which I think is really healthy. Or I remember I worked with someone for a little over a year. She lost over 50 pounds. We stopped because she felt like she was in a good place. She gained a bunch of it back. And then during the pandemic, I remember this, she and I ended up staying friends. And I saw her and she was like, you know what? I found my old notebooks from when we worked together and I did everything that you told me to do. And
Wow.
she's down even more weight. And now this is her life now.
Yeah.
So it was this beautiful moment of like, I needed to sort of go through what I went through, but now this is like how I'm living my life and I'm happy and I'm healthy. And the thing is with health, especially when you're making big changes, it's a process. It's building new habits. And I tell people like, yeah, if you yo-yo a little bit or like your diet has gotten better, but then you binge a bunch of times or you go off course, I'm never going to be mad. I'm never going to be upset
Right.
because
That's
this
okay.
is all part of the process of you. Like it's all just good information. All of this is good information. And if you're creating awareness around why, because if you know exactly why you binge those cookies and you figured it out in the moment of binging, then that's actually success to me.
Right.
Because
You've
we need that awareness to change.
right. It's conscious thought now instead of
Yeah,
just like,
right.
yeah. So I know more and more people in my own circle that are considering becoming kind of a health coach, a lifestyle coach, more holistic approach on things. What would you say to somebody who's thinking about getting in the industry that you know now that you may have not known when you first started? Is there certain things that you would find beneficial for somebody trying to get into this industry?
I would say figure out, I mean, obviously find a program that resonates with you. Like definitely get some training because I think it's incredibly helpful because life coaching especially is sort of like acting like you could just call yourself a life coach.
Sure. Yeah, it kind of has like an interesting tone to it. It's like life coach.
I
It's
know.
like, wow, that sounds
Right.
complicated.
Oh, great. I'll just be I'm alive. I'm
Yeah,
still alive. I'm doing this. I'll be
yeah,
a life coach. So find a training program that resonates with you and then understand that it's you're having your own business. It's quite entrepreneurial. And as you know, because you have
absolutely.
yours, like you have to really like it. Much like being an actor, you have to really love and feel passionate about it. 'Cause you have to show up like people are just gonna flock to you. Is that you know what I mean? Um, and I always tell people find out what your niche is. What are you most passionate about? Like I got into this because of gut health, because of autoimmune disease, because of my healing journey. And I just felt so passionate about I just was angry that I had so much misinformation. I was so put off that more people weren't just talking about what was happening. Just so because I knew, of course, once I recognized it myself, I started to meet so many people had similar stories. So I was like, I need to. If I don't ever want anyone to feel how shitty, sorry, how poorly I felt. Like I was doing so well, how poorly I felt, and I was just if it was like it will be worth me having this experience and coming out of it if I can help other people change. So that's where I came into the work. So I feel like you have to find that niche, that part of it that is so that you're passionate about because like being a trainer, like even being a doctor or a lawyer, like our industry is always changing. All I ever want to do, I'm the biggest nerd, is read about neuroscience, is read about the microbiome, is read about nutrition. And those are sort of the three things that I put together to help people heal. But I'm reading books about those every year because you have to stay ahead of things. So
Yes.
it's got to be something you're super passionate about. So you're staying current. And people tend to flock to authenticity. So
Right.
the more you're showing up, the more you're advertising yourself in a way that is very authentic to you, you're going to start to get people that resonate more with you. And it was interesting because I had this Instagram account for a number of years where I was like half in, half out. Like I loved this business. I loved teaching in New York, but I was kind of showing up on Instagram like everyone, like, here's a salad, here's a quote about something, like whatever. And when I had this realization during the pandemic that, and as corny as it sounds, I was like, this is my purpose. This is my life calling. Like, this is what I am meant to do, why I'm on this planet. I hired a business coach, and she was very much around like internet and Instagram, especially. And she's like, you have to start showing up every single day and just talking to your audience. And I was like, ugh,
Oh,
that
that
sounds
sounds
horrible,
terrible.
gross. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be an influencer, like, gross me out. Like, ew, I'm not that girl. And she's like, no, you need to show up and tell your story and just like share your life and be a human being behind these pretty pictures.
Yeah.
Because I had a lot of like modelly pretty pictures that I could post and I still do, but then I pair them with actual stories and things about what's going on in my life because I feel like if I'm going to show up and put effort into it, it's got to cost me something. I want someone to learn. And it's been a year and a half of me sort of shifting my Instagram and holy cow.
Wow. Really?
I mean, the amount, and I don't have a lot of followers. I still probably only have like 1,200 or so, but the community I have built is so they are so loyal, they are so interested, they are so excited about what I'm doing. And the amount of money I've made is like skyrocketed once
That's
I've learned how
incredible.
to deal with that.
Sure.
Oh my gosh, there's so much money to be made because there's so many people that, like, especially if you're in the healing industry and you know what you're talking about,
Right.
like, there's so many people that need what you have. And it's funny, I'm just on the tail end of this other international business coaching program with life coaches and meditation coaches from literally all over the world. And what I've realized is at the end of the day, most of us are really helping people with all the same thing, which is sort of healing and connecting and trusting and loving themselves. And the funny thing is, like, if this is something you want to get into, you can easily go on Instagram and be like, oh, there's so many people already doing it. But if this is something you truly resonate with and you feel passionate about, people are gonna want your specific brand.
Right.
And I had to do this whole, like, I had to interview a bunch of my old clients and ask them why they picked me. And one of the funniest things was a lot of people were like, I don't know, just like, I liked you. I liked how you talk. Like, you made me laugh, or I
Yes.
liked your story. I liked what you had to say. And I knew that, like, you would make me feel comfortable.
You're a human being.
And yeah, so the more you can really, I would say, follow your passion, get some training, and then show up really authentically, you'll have it. You'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
And the business side of things is really important because a lot of us went to school for something else, right? We didn't go to
Hmm.
business school. And I don't even know if what they teach you in business school is what we're doing today in these sort of
Right.
one-off entrepreneurial adventures and these things. So, yeah, the business side of things is fascinating. So, where can we find you on Instagram?
Healthy by Lianna, Lianna. That's where I hang out the most. Feel free to slide into my DMs. I'm open to giving anyone who needs to heal a free 45 minutes. I do free discovery sessions with anyone who's interested because I think health is a right that we all should be privileged to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you on any other social media, Twitter, Facebook?
I have Twitter at Lianna Nielsen, but I don't really use it. And then I'm on TikTok, try figuring out. Oh, I do Clubhouse.
Okay.
Do I've gotten into Clubhouse. So if you're on Clubhouse, find me. I do a room on Sundays and like a mental health and wellness room, and then I pop in and out and co-moderate with other people. So if you're in Clubhouse, I'm there at Healthy by Lianna or Lianna Nielsen, Nielsen. And we can have a conversation because Clubhouse
Nice.
is.
Excellent.
Do you ever go on it?
No, not yet. I was invited once, but I use Android, and I guess it was an
Oh,
Apple thing,
you
and I'm
can't.
not
Yeah.
cool enough yet to be included in the clubhouse. So I
Sorry
either
about
have to
that.
get an Apple or I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but
Oh my God, wait, why don't you? I'm always curious when people don't have Apple. Why do you have an Android?
I think it's just one of those things that I started with, and then just I stuck with it, and it was just easy. The rest of my products are Apple, and no
Does
plug in
Kelly
Apple.
have a iPhone or an Android?
iPhone. Yeah. Oh yeah. Most of my
Oh,
life is iPhone. Family, all surroundings, brother, parent. I have an Android. It's just one of those stupid, stubborn things that I'm just
you're
comfortable
one
with.
of those people.
Like, okay, I'm supporting a different company. That's not. Um, so what do you have working on right now?
I am so excited to be launching the my first entirely virtual group program, and it's based on this course I used to teach in New York City. But with the pandemic, we're all putting things online. And I hadn't taught this course in a couple of years because I'd moved and obviously the pandemic. So the healing journey I've had in the past 2 years, especially around, my mental health and stepping into my purpose and really learning to love and trust myself and dealing with my divorce and all that stuff. I feel like I have so many more tools. I ended up actually a couple of years ago going to work for this company in Ojai doing this training at the Human Being Store, which is a very funny name for this company that does it's personal leadership and development work with a sort of spiritual angle to it. But
Mhm.
it's basically this woman who used to teach this leadership master's program at the George Washington University in DC, who then left DC and worked with Deepak Chopra for a couple of years. So it's this really interesting, very cool company that helps people really get connected to essentially their purpose, what they're best in. And we work, with large companies to help align people to what they're best in within them. And so I have these two trainings now where it's like I have this really intense 10 years of holistic nutrition training through school and then just on my own continuously. And I have specialization. I went back to school for hormone health, especially in women, and gut health. And then this other amazing training for a couple of years with this leadership and development company. So what I had done is combined both of those things into this 12-week program, where the initial part of it, we do like the sugar detox or some version of it that I mentioned earlier, where essentially we optimize, we get people really understanding like nutrition, your microbiome, how your blood sugar works, figure out what foods work specifically for you, self-care, things like sleep and exercise. So when you do that, you optimize your brain function. So
Wow.
then we go deeper and start to really connect to, what you're passionate about, what your purpose is, and really start to deal with our limiting beliefs and fears and blocks and old stories that keep us sort of locked up. So it's a really intensive, deep dive on your physical health and then your mental health to get you really connected and trusting yourself, so you can go out into the world and be really self-directed and, know the next steps to creating a life you love. So I'm launching that actually this Saturday, but
That
it's
sounds
going to
fascinating.
be um it's 12 weeks. It's group calls, it's one-on-one calls, it's accountability partners, it's a whole fun thing. And then I'm launching it again in the fall. So I'll be
Okay.
doing another round, probably starting the beginning of September. It was so funny because I had so many people being like, "Are you doing this again?" So I have like almost a waiting list of people for the fall.
Wow,
So
congratulations. That's exciting.
I
I was
know,
gonna
I
ask
know.
if you have repeat people signing up, or where can
Well, it's
people
funny. Some of
sign
my
up?
old clients were like, I need this. Some of my old clients and students were like, hit me up. But I have a website, which is also Healthy by Lianna. So you can find more information there and schedule a free discovery call if that's what you're into. And we can talk more about all the things I do one-on-one. I do speaking events. I contribute to a lot of different like magazine articles on nutrition and holistic health. And yeah, and then I just started doing group programs again, which is, I think they're really special because when you get a bunch of people coming together with the intention to sort of heal and grow and learn, you go so much further together and people become inspired by, the things other people are learning. And
It's
it's
a little
just,
community of people.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Truly. Like at the end of like, if I work with someone for 6 months a year, like I'm like, I love them. I'm
Are your
invested in
family
it.
now?
I know, that's what it feels like. Like, I just feel like I'm growing this huge family of people where it's like, I just want to see, it's like they're my kids. I'm like, I just want to see you fly away and follow your dreams.
Well, I'll
It's so
be
dorky.
sure to put in the show notes where people can find you, where they can sign.
Please do.
I am so proud of you, and I know you're going to be successful in this. This has been a joy to watch you grow into this new identity. I don't know if I've ever seen you happier. It's great, and you're definitely in bloom right now. So,
Oh, thank you.
congratulations on
I
all
feel
that.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
congratulations.
and it's funny because I'll leave you with this. It's so dorky, but you truly can have, and I'm experiencing this as we speak, if you take good care of yourself, you learn to listen and trust yourself and just follow what makes you feel good, and you're clear about what you want, you can create the most beautiful life that you can imagine. And it's there. And it's like the partner that you couldn't even imagine existed. And the city, it's like we're looking at apartments that are amazing. I'm making more money than I've like out of nowhere, like not
That's
out of
amazing.
nowhere, but I feel like all of a sudden the amount of money I'm making is like tremendous, like triple, double, like it's crazy. It's crazy, but it's all because I did the work.
Right.
But if you're willing to do it, like it is there. You do not need to settle for a life that is like a B minus.
Yeah. Well, it shows, and again, so proud of you. This has been a great time talking. I learned so much about you, and you're my own cousin. This is fascinating.
Oh, I
So
love it.
thank you so very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to talking soon.
Me too. Thank you. I love you. This is great.
This was great. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here at the Art of Actual Change. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I will do my best each week to try to bring you new, inspirational, motivating people who are doing work around the globe to make a big difference. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like down below and subscribe. And again, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for joining.